Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is an event hosted by the Winnett ACES. If you aren't familiar with us, ACES stands for Agricultural Community Enhancement and Sustainability. And this is a rancher-led nonprofit. We have two full-time staff. Josh is back here. He's a Pheasants Forever position, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator. My name is Kendall Wojcik, and we're really excited that you're here today. We decided to put together this event because there were a lot of questions going around in our community just about, with being in the middle of a drought, but we're having a little bit of rain, what does that mean for this year's fire season? Because it's probably coming. What resources do landowners have? What's that chain of command if a fire does break out? And then what if you do experience fire? How do you come back from that? What is that toll like emotionally or otherwise? So we have a couple speakers set up for you today, and we're going to start out by going over to the DNRC in Fergus County, and that's Don Pyra and Anika Pela, and they will present on their end of things. Then we're going to move over to the BLM with Jay Peterman and Case Parker. And then after that, we're going to head over and listen to Toby Dahl, and he's going to give us the landowner experience. And we were going to have Bill Castle here. He's our local sheriff and DES coordinator, but unfortunately he had sheriff duties that he had to attend to. So I'll give you guys a little invitation to what this event is prepping for in the community of Winnett, doing an eventual exercise of what does it look like if a fire does threaten our town. So that's all I have for you, and I am going to hand it over to Don and Anika. And thank you guys so much for attending.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. So I'll start and then I'll have Anika introduce herself. I'm Don Pyra. I'm the Fire Management Officer for the Northeastern Land Office in Lewistown. I know I've heard Toby talk before. He's down in Musselshell County. Musselshell County is out of the Southern Land Office. We have Golden Valley and Wheatland, Fergus, Judith Basin, Petroleum, Choteau, and Hill County all the way to the North Dakota line. And Anika and I are up here in Valley County. The maps on the back wall back there are some fuels work that we're doing at the Pines Recreation Area. It's essentially a subdivision of 80 homes that we've been working on since 2016. Trying to increase the educational effort on defensibility of homes in the urban interface area. That's truly what the urban interface looks like up here. Is that's a good example of that. So, been with the DNRC since 2009. I worked for the career firefighter in Lewistown prior to that, and before that, a long time ago, in a world far, far away. My wife and I ranched in the family ranch and enterprise for a number of years. So I've got to see this from a lot of different sides of the apple, so to speak. So anyway, that's what I got for you. So I'll keep it over to Anika for a minute.
Hi, I'm Anika. My last name was Tuss. So if people recognize that last name, that I'm from Lewistown. I just got employed here. I'm the Community Preparedness and Fire Prevention Specialist for the DNRC Northeastern Land Office. I was with the BLM in Forest Service previously to this for about 16 years, doing primary fire, wildland firefighting, and now I'm into a preparedness job and pretty excited about it. So yeah, basically what my job is, I do risks assessments around homes for homeowners, particularly in the high risk communities. And then I coordinate with like the counties and our other cooperators, and then the foresters, and we come up with a plan with the home assessments and forestry assistance visits. So yeah, I'll be out there, more of a public presence more than anything. and doing home assessments. So hope to see you around more.
Perfect. Thanks, Annika. I'm going to share my screen. I got 5 PowerPoint slides that I want to share with you guys a little bit. And just to talk about how the County Cooperative Fire Management Program works for the DNRC, because it'll give you some context about the capacity or the lack of capacity that we have. So our fire program again is looks different in 6 different land offices across the state. It's one fire program, but it does have some nuances that look a little bit different in some other places. So what's the essence of? All right. So what's the essence of the co-op program? You guys can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that on my PowerPoint? Thanks, Toby. So the essence of the co-op program is it started in like 1967, and it really is what I call a 5-legged stool. It's based on loaning equipment to the counties for fire suppression. And back in the origins of the program, there was a bunch of yellow military trucks that ran around there, and we got a bunch of those things, made wildland fire apparatus out of them, and gave them to the counties. And that worked for a number of years. And after the busy fire years in 2000, 2003, and 2006, the legislature said, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And they started funding a pretty active program of replacing all that old yellow stuff with new 450, F450 and F550s, and replacing those out in the county. And so we've really gone a long ways toward improving the quality of the equipment that is out there in the counties. And there's some good stuff. And the numbers of those pieces vary between counties, and they vary on where they're located, because we've always left that at a decision level of the county. We loan it to the county, and the county makes the decision where they think it's best located. So that's a key component to our program is equipment. Another big piece is that we conduct training for local government fire personnel to increase their firefighting skill set. There's a number of classes that are out there that we provide on an annual basis, primarily in the wintertime. To do that, there's also non-fire suppression classes that would be some of the support functions in fire. Typically, we get firefighters that want to be on fire trucks that ask for training. So our training program is kind of keyed that way. We assist with organization and planning for fire districts, fire companies, fire service areas, and fire departments. When you look up, there are different organization components. They're not just all fire departments. And so I threw that out there more than anything as just an educational thing, is that not all fire departments are fire departments. Some of them are fire districts, fire companies, or fire service areas. So kind of a subtle nuance, but it really boils down to how is that fire organization funded? And so there's a big difference with some of the funding mechanisms in those. And obviously there's fire organizations that are really well funded and fire organizations that have to rely heavily on bake sales and raffles to make their money. And that affects, their ability to provide service to their customers. So we assist with that. Another one of the big ones is we assist counties with fire response when they request for help through the person called the county fire warden. County fire warden's appointed by the commissioners to act as a liaison between the county fire departments and our office for all of those needs regarding fire, the equipment needs, the training needs, the fire response needs. That's our go-between. That's our contact. And then, we really lack the capacity to do much, to be honest with you, for wildland fire prevention, education, and preparedness. We have 2 people in Lewistown for a large chunk of country. And I started down the road of finding some soft funding over a year ago, and through a forest action plan improvement grant, we got a hold of enough money to hire Annika into this position. So that's her focus. So I'll let her talk a little bit about that again, if you'd like.
Yeah, so basically, you'll see me out there in high-risk communities in the Northeastern Land Office, basically doing home assessments. So, and then I'm going to be with our forester here. His name is Josh Stoikoff, and we will be bouncing around together. He'll be doing more the forestry side, fuels reduction assessments, and then I'll be doing the risk assessments for the homes itself, and more of that public information officer, if you will, for our office, land office. So that's my gig. So yeah, if you have any questions, I can give you my phone number at the end of this, and you can call me anytime. Thanks. I'll also be doing wildfires during fire season. So
yeah, she's not out of the suppression world completely. Yeah, she'll have a primary responsibility to do that too. So the rest of her off-season stuff will largely be in that community preparedness realm. So that's what the county co-op program looks like. The other thing I want to talk about, because this really fits in to I think the goal and of the conversation today is talk about cohesive strategy for wildland fire management. And there's three pieces that go with this. So this has been a concept that's been supported by the state and federal agencies and by the National Association of State Foresters and the Chiefs Association. And that is, let's try to do something together, because we can do more together than we can as individuals if we operate with a common set of goals in mind. And so the one up on top there is restore and maintain landscapes. We talk about resilient landscapes. We live in an environment that evolved over time with fire, and fire is a part of our natural ecosystem, and all fire is not evil. Fire can be used successfully as a tool. And when you couple that with vegetation management, it can be very successful, done at the right time and the right opportunities. So that's a big piece of where we're at. We aren't staffed real heavy, obviously, to be able to do a lot of it, but we've worked quite well with the BLM and the Fish and Wildlife Service, working with them in their fuel projects. If there's a piece of state ground that's included within their burn unit, we're more than happy to let them include those lands of ours and help and assist them when we can. So we got good partnerships with that. The fire adapted communities in the home ignition zone really is what Annika's talking about, and working with our service forester, Josh Stoikoff, to talk about what that looks like for small acreage forests and properties for individuals, to try to bring that next level of awareness to those folks and make them aware of what the resources are available to them to improve the survivability of their properties for when wildland fires occur. And then, of course, the third piece of the cohesive strategy is just safe and effective fire response. And so what that is that safe and effective fire response is really the core of the DNRC fires program, is providing that equipment, the training, the suppression assistance that increases the capacity of local governments to hopefully to take care of, most of their fires without any level of intervention on our part. And I'm very proud to say that I believe that there's 98, 99, 99.9, whatever number of percentage you want to put on there, that the local fire departments successfully deal with on their own without having to ask for help from us. And so that's our whole goal, is to increase the capacity of those local fire departments to deal with those fire events on their own. And then in those extreme cases that fires become large and they become what we call extended attack fires, that's really where we truly step in and provide them some assistance. So you've got the tenets of our program, you got the tenets of the cohesive strategy out there. And what we're trying to do is just work together with people on the same page, to successfully save lives, property, and homes. I mean, that's the bottom line where we're at. So Kendall asked me, what's it look like? So this is what predictive services says June and July look like. So the red means above normal fire potential beginning in July for a lot of the stuff east of the Rocky Mountain front, clear over into North Dakota, and then of course down through the Midwest. But we're really dealing with our geographic area coordination is Montana, the Panhandle, Idaho, and North Dakota. So yeah, they're saying, hey, hang on. And they're really saying that they don't see much improvement through August and September. So, but what do you mean? It's been raining, right? So one, they're not always right. They're weather people. They're not always right, but they've got, they base their guesses on some modeling, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not. The thing that I can tell you is the grasses are green. Yep. The small fuels, and I hope Parker or Peterman will kick in on this a little bit, but we're starting to rebound the fuel moistures in the 10s and the 100s. So those are just fuel classifications. Don't get drug into the weeds in this. The big one that's still shocking is the 1,000-hour fuels. Those thousands are still really dry. So think about that as trees, right? So those trees are still coming out of the drought that we experienced over the last couple of years. And it takes prolonged moisture to really return those trees, those large fuels, to their quote normal level that we would like to see. And in the meantime, that until those levels rebound, we get a fire that starts in those large fuels and is going to severely impact and cause some damage to some pretty good timber stands if we get fire occurrence in those before we get those fuel conditions rebounded. I mean, who would have thought? I can tell you that I've lived in Fergus County my entire life, and I can tell you that I did not think we would lose the 90% of the South Moccasin fires in less than 8 hours. Based on those extreme conditions and the status of those dry fuels in the South Moccasins. So, yeah, who knows? We'll know more. We'll know more at the end of fire season. But yeah, they're saying it dries out, especially when the grasses go. We've still got conditions to have some pretty good fire activities. So we'll know more later. So some of the questions that Kendall posed for me, kind of through the email, when does the DNRC take over a fire? We really try not to believe that we take over a fire, so to speak. That fire is still the jurisdictional responsibility of the local government or the counties by statute. We provide assistance, but we don't just say, hey, everybody go home, see you later, we got this now. We work with them to suppress that fire and to be able to turn it back over to the counties, to the landowners in a condition that it's not going to go anywhere. Sometimes it's not 100% out, but we turn it over with control principles in place, to control objectives in place, to believe that fire is not going to move anymore. So there's that. Whose responsibility is suppression of the fire? So the thing that I want to talk about is jurisdictional responsibility. So by state statute, the county is responsible for suppression of the fire on state and private lands within the bounds of the county. If it's a BLM, if it's on BLM ground, the BLM is responsible for the suppression of the fire. If it's on Fish and Wildlife Service ground, it's their responsibility to suppress the fire. What's that mean? It's important that we know where the ownership of the fire starts, because ultimately it's their responsibility to suppress the fire. And that helps us really make a determination on who pays, or do we share the cost of that fire. So it's that's the jurisdictional responsibility, which is also coupled with an investigation piece to determine the cause and the origin of the fire. There's 10 subcategories of fire causes, basically. And there's only 2 of them that are truly natural fires, and one of them is lightning and the other one is coal seams. Mm-hmm. Everything else is caused by humans in their daily course of activities, or sometimes not daily course of activities. But the bottom line is that over 50%, I wish I could give you the exact number, but it is well over 50% of the fires that cost us a lot of money are the results of human causes. And so part of the responsibility and the educational effort with Annika doing fire prevention outreach will be to try to increase the level of awareness, to try to, make people, essentially, be more diligent in their use of in their everyday lives, and try to reduce the number of human caused fires that are out there. And then, which goes to the bottom line, who's responsible for the damage caused by the fire? If it's a lightning fire, it's a coal seam fire, that's basically falls under the act of God clause. And how do who's responsible for that? Well, it's really the jurisdiction that owns that land, or it's responsible for that thing. The whole thing is that potentially there's, civil, criminal or civil avenues for human caused fires if they are chosen to be pursued largely by the counties or the jurisdictional agencies. So that's really gets into the way down in the weeds, but it's just a good level of awareness, is that truly somebody driving down the highway causing a fire technically could be responsible for the fire costs associated with suppressing that fire. And there's a whole another bailiwick that goes with that. But fires is an expensive game, so to speak. It costs a lot of money. I think last year, I believe the state of Montana spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 million on fire season 2017. And that's not the state of Montana. That's every one of us sitting in this room in this meeting today that's taxpayers in the state of Montana, is that we all paid our share, so to speak, of suppressing all those fires. So that's really our job, is to try to reduce the impact to people and reduce the number of human caused fires. So any questions for either Annika or I, or conversation?
Yeah, this is Toby Dahl. Is pursuing criminal charges, is that commonly done, or is that used with a lot of discretion?
Toby, that's a really good question. And it really boils down to the county attorneys, because the fires that occur, at least on the east side in Montana, that occur on private lands, especially, are their discretion. And the criminal aspect really becomes, I'm going to use the term less, Toby. And the reason I'm going to use the term less is that if you start a fire that a firefighter is killed, or somebody's death results, and they determine that that person died because of the result of that fire, there certainly is the potential to have criminal charges come out of that thing. So I think the civil piece is the thing that most people really key upon, is the civil the civil suit that regards the damages and the loss of property. But I threw the criminal out there because there has been criminal charges filed on fires that did result in the loss of life. So it does hang out there. So good question, Toby. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, you did. I mean, so many of these fires that are human caused, you hear the rumors that, it was human caused and they kind of know, but I can think of very few instances where I ever heard of a follow-up, the follow-up. I mean, whatever happened to it?
Yeah. Not trying to go too far down in the weeds, but there's a standard for fire investigations. I can talk about this from my previous life in the fire department. There's a standard for fire investigations that are very difficult to get through a court of law because it all boils down to testing methodology, right? And chain of custody and a whole bunch of other things that, quite honestly, it boils down to that they have to improve intent, and that in gross negligence. And those are the things that are often difficult to achieve that litmus test that meets those criteria. And as a result, a lot of county attorneys don't want to put the time and the investment into those, especially if there's not a good solid chain of custody and evidence and a solid investigation that's been done that meets the litmus test set out through, it's called NFPA 921. It's a standard for fire investigations and explosions. So it's really caught in this whim that a lot of times, no, it's really not that much money. And man, is the juice worth the squeeze to prosecute it? And quite honestly, a lot of them just won't touch them, Toby. So
I've also seen where the fire departments and, people have been proven to be very forgiving over in these man-caused fires, which is I don't have a dog in that fight, but I've thought that the fire departments have been awful kind to a lot of people over the years.
I would agree with that. I think that the human aspect of that is it's one thing if, you've got somebody that's intentionally setting fires, right? Let's talk about that versus somebody's out there. They're baling hay, the wind's blowing, they lose a bearing on the baler, the fire goes 20,000 acres over the hill.
Yeah.
Of us can look back and go, damn, that could have happened to me today, right? So there's that level of forgiveness, Toby, that I actually agree with you that we see that a lot. That does occur. Yeah.
Thanks for that question, Toby. Don and Anika are going to stick around till the end. So if you have any more questions, we can ask them then. The BLM is going to present next, and they have to skedaddle after their presentation. So if you do have any questions for Case and Jay, please ask those right after their presentation, and I'll hand it over to them. Thanks.
All right, start with some introductions and then we'll go into kind of our PowerPoint presentation. I'm Case Parker, fuel specialist for the BLM out of Lewistown. I started with the Forest Service and primary fire in 2009. A lot of time on some crews and stuff. Came to Zortman as a captain in 2018, and then I got this job, my current job, the fuel specialist, in the winter of 2020.
And I'm Jay Peterman. Hi, morning, everyone. Background on myself, I'm the fuel specialist with the BLM. I cover the monument and then all the Highline BLM field offices north of the river. I've been in Lewistown for 2 years now as a fuel specialist. Before that, I got my start in fire in 2006 and on a fuels crew, and then worked my way up through the engine system to an engine captain, and I ran an engine for 7 years with the BLM as a captain before I got this job in 2020, I guess. I think kind of what Case and I wanted to talk about was just some of the proactive stuff we do with fuels and really fuel-centric stuff in Petroleum County. I'll kick it back to Case.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. All right, you guys see that?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, sure. There, can you see it?
Yep.
All right, so what we're going to look at is the Petroleum County BLM fuels treatments. So our objectives for this, we'll go over the wildfire history on it out there, past, present, and future fuels treatments. Then Jay will go cover our fuels planning process. All right, so here's Petroleum County. So on this map, you can see the veg treatments are in the black, wildfire history is in the red. We do have a pretty significant amount of our fire load does happen in Petroleum County. So obviously there's Winnett down here. A lot of these fires I wasn't around for. I don't know how far back this map dates, but just to kind of orient you, I think this was like up here was a Raven Rat Patch fire. This was the Ridge Top fire. This one was Alex Camp. I believe this was the Crying fire. I think this was part of the Lodgepole complex. And then this was like Twin Bridges, I believe. The only one I was around here for was this Ridge Top fire, but just from being out there and talking to other people around here, I think that's what those other fires are out there. So our fuels treatments, the black stuff here. So this kind of all started out here from my knowledge, I believe in 2009. They started down here in this lower area. Can you guys see my mouse on the screen? Hopefully. Yep. Okay, so we know where I'm pointing. This is Tin Can Hill area. They started doing the burns down there in 2009. We've kind of progressed onto that with some mechanical treatments out into this area. I'll get into that in a little bit more. Up in here is the Lower Crooked Creek Phase 1 burns that we've been implementing out there. And then up here is along Muscle Shell Trail. I believe there was some manual treatment, lop and scatter stuff out there. Okay. So that's kind of the history of what is out there. So for present stuff, we generally try to do one landscape burn a year. Windows are pretty tight to do that. Our landscape burns, can average anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 acres. Obviously, we need a window for that. Jay will go into kind of that a little more. Drought has obviously been an issue the last couple of years, and it's pushed it back a few years. It's just too dry to meet our objectives. Like I said, Jay will go into that a little more. Unit F is right up in here. It's between that Carl's Camp and Horse Camp Road. We've had that one on the books for a couple of years, but like I said, it's drought, so it keeps getting pushed back. So coming back down into the Tin Can Hill area here, we've been doing some mastication and stuff out there, contracts and lop and scatter stuff to try to kind of at least do something out there while we're not able to burn. So this is Tin Can Hill Road here. So we started this a few years ago. That's not on this map is this area up in here has all been completed. I don't remember how many acres. It's quite a bit, but this has all been mastication work, contracts. So send out contracts, they get awarded, they come in with grinders and they masticate the stuff. This stuff in here, the purple, should be done this summer, and then this stuff out in here will be done hopefully the start of next year. I think they can start in October 1st, but it'll probably be next summer when they start on that stuff. So we have some different type of fuels treatments, obviously other than burning. We have mastication, we have lop and scatter, and we have cut, pile, and burn. So as I go through this, I'll just kind of go over the pros and cons of why we do all these. So we'll start with the mastication. So starting with pros, we can use it if significant control problems are present with burning. So for burning, we like to use, main roads or 2 tracks, like good holding features. And you guys are aware of that country out there. It's some areas, there's a lot of distance between that. So it makes it burn really big and not really feasible to do. Around some other different areas where maybe fire isn't quite wanted. But so this mastication, it allows us to get in there and still do fuels work without putting fire on the ground. We can complete it pretty much any time of year. There is some wildlife restrictions on it when we can't be out there, but it's not like burning where we don't need a window for it. We can complete it most any time of year. We can target specific fuels on it and size classes. With burning, we do that as well, trying to get the right prescription and have the right window. So, it'll kind of only take care of what we want. For example, like burning post green up, we're not targeting the grass, we're generally targeting the regen and the juniper. With mastication, we can write a size classes like, well, we're only cutting this and we're leaving this, we're spacing it or whatever. So we can target specific stuff like that. Some cons for mastication. It's pretty expensive. It's about $400 to $500 an acre. So it's pretty expensive compared to burning. Burning is actually our cheapest, really. It only rearranges the fuels, so you think about it, you're grinding all these trees, like you're not really getting rid of those fuels, you're just rearranging them, you're just scattering them around until it decomposes. So the fuels are still there for a couple of years. After a couple of years, depending on snow and rain, they do rot down. But for that first initial few years, it's only rearranging it. It's not really getting rid of it. It usually often only includes BLM land. We do do some on state as well. But generally it's only BLM land that this is included in. And then since there's machinery out here doing it, it's pretty slope dependent. You can't get into too steep of stuff on it. So I think generally 35% is what we shoot for in our contracts. Anything more than 35, they don't go into that stuff. So that's kind of an area, I guess, that constricts it. So next we'll do talk about lop and scatter. So this is still out here. This is Jitney Road, it's Tin Can Hill. This is a project we got going on this year. This is going to go over multiple years. Obviously, it's a pretty big area. It's the sagebrush encroachment. So what we're doing is we're going out there. Our fire crew is doing this. We're actually doing this in-house and basically trimming back and cutting back all the trees that are encroaching in these sagebrush areas. This was done quite a few years ago. I want to say 10 or 15 years ago, but obviously stuff's starting to grow back in. So we're going back in and we're taking care of it again. We started over here in this far east corner, and like I said, we'll work west, and it's quite a few years obviously of work. We're not getting this done this year, but this is starting this year. So some pros to that. It's the same as mastication. You can utilize it if significant control features aren't present, rather than burning it. Slope doesn't limit access on this. It's manual. You're on the ground doing this, you're walking around doing it. So slope doesn't limit that. Same thing, you can target specific size classes, same as mastication. It is cheaper than mastication. It's about $150 per acre, which is still more than burning though, but it is a cheaper option. Same with mastication. It rearranges the fuel bed. It doesn't get rid of it. And then with this, it takes longer to decompose all this stuff because they're bigger pieces. Generally, we shoot for like the biggest piece that we're cutting, like 2 feet in length and no more than 2 feet in depth. So bigger pieces take longer to rot. So it takes a little longer to rot down than the mastication does, just because they're bigger chunks laying out there. I don't have a map of this, but another one we got, like I said, is the cut, pile, and burn. We did this on the BLM ground along 79 Trail and Dunn Ridge, and we just finished burning one of those just this last winter. So this is the same thing. Control lines aren't present. We can still do this. Slope doesn't limit access. We can target specific fuel class and sizes. This actually will remove the biomass because we're piling it and we're burning it. There for a couple of years, we still have the piles there because they got to dry out, but it does actually get rid of it. And it is cheaper than mastication. The cost of this is kind of varies. It seems like it varies on how much is there to cut and all that stuff and pile. Since we do have fire in this, it is weather dependent. We need snow or significant amount of rain to burn it. We can't obviously burn it just any time of year because there's fire involved. So we gotta have the right weather window in the winter time to go out there and get these piles burnt. It does take some time to complete. It's a couple year process before we even can light the piles, just because we gotta let them dry out and be ready to burn, be available, so that when we do burn them, they consume. Or I think our 70% consumption is our objective generally. So want to make sure those get done. So it is a larger time commitment, just from the start to finish. You know, you might see the effects, I guess, kind of right away, but there's still the piles out there. Whereas, you know, when you masticate something or lop and scatter, you go in, it's one entry and you're done. With cutting it and piling it and then burning it, it's usually a couple entries. So it can be a longer process on that. So that covers, you know, kind of the fire history out there, what I know of it, and then our history of fuels projects out there. So past fuels projects, these are current projects out there. And then this is our future projects out here. So down here, again, we got the tin can that was started quite a few years ago. We've revised that burn plan. We're looking at a re-entry into that stuff. The reason for that is it's cheaper and easier to maintain than initial RXs, because there's not the biomass in there. There's not the amount of regen and all that stuff in there, since it's already been burned once 10 years ago. And we look at about a 10-year rotation is kind of our goal. So we're looking at getting out there. As far as timeline, you know, it's drought dependent. You know, the last 2 years we aren't able to burn just because it's been too dry. So if we can't burn for a couple of years, it kind of pushes everything back, obviously. You know, we try to plan out 4 years, but everything's getting pushed back right now due to the drought. Up here, this next circle, this will be Crooked Creek Phase 2. This will be an initial entry. We haven't done anything out here. It's a continuation of the lower Crooked Creek burns that we did just north of it off the Crooked Creek Road. So same thing, time frame, you know, that's going to be, excuse me, probably quite a few years out on that one. And then up here is the Muscle Shell Trail area. So we're looking at this area in here, probably doing a mix of some mechanical, manual, and which when I say mechanical and manual, I mean like the masticating, the cutting and piling, lop and scatter, and maybe even some burning out here as well. It's a new area that's identified. Jay will go into the process of it. It takes a while to get this process going, but we've identified this area to start doing some treatments in. Like I said, what those will be, we're not sure yet, but we will start on some treatments up in that area as well. So that kind of covers what's has been done, what we're doing, what we will be doing out in Petroleum County. I realize this isn't in Petroleum County, but it's close enough. I figured I should add it in here just for your guys' knowledge. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jay, and he can go through some of the planning process and everything that we do.
Hey everybody, Jay Peterman again. I've noticed Case failed to mention when we burned those Petroleum County piles that the only time we could do it out there was when it was -20. So I'm glad we got those piles done and don't have to go back out there when it's -20, because that's the only time the snow stays around for more than a day. So I'll just advance the slide. So talking with Kendall, I was just going to brush the surface of the BLM's planning process, how we determine some of these areas. Case already talked about it, that we want to do fuels treatments in, and what that process looks for us, and how come we can't just go out there and coordinate these big burns one after another in short order, because it does take time. It's still a government process, and anytime there's been a negative outcome or negative consequence, it seems to add on to that process throughout the years. I was glad Don touched on the cohesive strategy for wildland management, because it's kind of part of our framework that helps steer our fire management goals and objectives. And that fuels, which is what Case and I really specialize in, fuels planning, fuels projects, that's just a proactive approach to fire management, trying to get there ahead of the fire, trying to, you're not necessarily going to stop a fire from happening, but you can influence the severity, and you can influence the effectiveness of suppression techniques. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about, lastly, I'll talk about owners or landowners' involvement with us, what we've done in the past with some of these treatments, because we do involve private land on some of our treatments, and how and what that looks like. So the initial process is, it all starts with kind of our NEPA process. It's a National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. And it was kind of spawned out of some unforeseen circumstance when the government was just trying to go out and get work done on the lands. They'd go out and implement a project, and then something would happen that nobody really saw coming. So it was mandated by Congress that we go through this NEPA process to propose any actions and do work on the landscape on BLM land. So we are taking the time to analyze what our actions are going to have, not only on the landscape, but the lands around us and the wildlife species around us too. It provides all the different specialist input onto the proposed action. And it also provides public comment, which is where you guys can get involved during that NEPA process. It's the first process where if a landowner has a big issue with something planned in an area, that's the time to start bringing up those issues. Then the agency administrator, which is our decision maker, can start considering some of those issues right at the beginning of the project, and then making a decision whether this is a good route we're going down to reduce fuels in this case, or what have you. And all this takes place before any kind of project implementation. It all kind of starts with the assessment of what's out there and what the proposed action is, and what that proposed action, what kind of impacts that would have to other resources and adjacent lands. And then as part of the fuels project, there's always monitoring follow-up we do to make sure we're not only hitting our objectives, but that the future years are having positive results that we want to see when we propose this action. So we're keeping track of the projects through what, 5 years, Case? For the next 5 years, to make sure we're meeting our objectives of whatever the fuel treatment is, whether it's mastication or prescribed fire. So some of the objectives and goals, those are really steered towards the purpose and need in the NEPA process. We do fuels projects like that Lop and Scatter Sagebrush Park Case was talking about earlier. That's really a wildlife driven project to protect critical sagebrush habitat. You know, we're cutting conifer out of the sagebrush, but we're not producing a ton of hazardous fuels out there. So fuels management is just a tool to accomplish an objective. And that objective on this case is protect critical sage grouse habitat by removing conifer. Most of our fuels projects, we incorporate a hazardous fuels component into it as well, because we are removing biomass. So it doesn't matter whether it's mechanical treatment or if it's a prescribed fire. Those are tools to manage the land to get it to a state you want to get it to. Some of the other resources, like for a burn plan, some of the resource objectives we have, and this is derived during that NEPA process, is to improve and maintain condition class in the ponderosa stands, reduce available fuel loadings, reduce ladder fuels and stand densities within the ponderosa, reduce conifer encroachment into the rangelands. So those resource objectives are what steer our prescribed fire and treatment objectives. There's a lot of modeling that goes into areas we want to treat, and they're mostly overstocked conifer stands out in the breaks. And specifically in Petroleum County, looking back in that fire map, Case showed that all the gigantic red blobs is what really honed us into the Crooked Creek Tin Can area to start our treatments in that area, because there was a wildfire problem up there. So some of the prescribed fire objectives. So anytime, you know, the NEPA process, all the input from public, and then specialists identifying their resource statements. That's a multi-year process for large landscape projects. After that, we start identifying areas within the analysis area where we could maybe look at mechanical treatments or prescribed fire options. Prescribed fires kind of our default, because like you said, it's the cheaper and oftentimes most effective way to treat hazardous fuels. So we start trying to break out polygons from there and look at burning. And then we always have to do our burns under an agency approved burn plan, which goes out for technical review to another qualified burn boss. And it's all done under this burn plan where we're setting environmental parameters and that we have to follow as burn bosses. So, and that's kind of a contract between us and our overhead, our agency administrators, that we're going to operate in this safe way, and we're going to burn under these conditions We're not going to go out when it's too hot and dry that we're not going to be able to control the wild or the fire that we put on the ground. Obviously, throughout history, and New Mexico is a prime example right now, there's been issues where even despite the best modeling and planning, prescribed fires have gotten away. So anytime you're putting fire on the ground, there's that risk and that liability that there could be a negative outcome. We do everything we can to plan for it and operate in a safe and efficient manner. But when you're putting fire on the ground, there's a risk to it. And most of us all here know that. And we also really can recognize that it's not an if or a when. And if we can do it in our terms under a burn plan we've written where we should expect fire behavior that we can control, then that's going to significantly negate a fire starting at least an extreme crown fire starting, in July and August and September when fuels are really explosive and the severity of that wildfire would be much different than a fire moving through that country in April, May, or June. So that's kind of the big purpose behind prescribed fires. And then the main objectives on pretty much all of our burn plans are confining the fire to the burn unit, operating in a safe and efficient manner. For the breaks, we pretty much try to minimize burning 75%, or we try to burn at least 75% of the ponderosa stands within the unit. And we're trying to top kill 30 to 60% of conifers, less than 3 inches DBH. So all the regen, remove that undergrowth. And we're also trying to limit mortality in trees bigger than 8 inches DBH to 30% or less. So we recognize we're probably going to lose some bigger trees, but we're going to try to minimize losing the big trees and maximize killing the small ones, removing those ladder fuels from the forest stand. So going to landowner involvement. For our mechanical treatments, like Kate just touched on, a lot of times we will treat the state and the BLM. It's pretty easy to define borders, and we recognize vegetation doesn't follow property boundaries. But for us to spend taxpayer dollar, we need to be able to justify, pass the red face test, and show that there's a direct benefit to the BLM. Because we've done fuels treatments on state land, we've done fuels treatments on FWP land, BOR land, and BLM land. We help the Forest Service out and the fish out, plan burns with them, and we spend BLM money to do that. And we also do it with private land. There's been several burns out in the Tin Can Creek areas that include private land. And for us to be able to do that, we have to, we start talking with the landowners early in the process and make sure they're on board with burning up their land, right? Because if a landowner says, no, I don't want any fire on my private land, then that is what it is. But if they can recognize, some prescribed fire benefits to their land, which a lot of times they do, often it's a benefit to us as prescribed fire planners to be able to hold it to that next road. And it's cheaper and more efficient for us. There's a direct benefit to the BLM. We're not only treating the BLM land, but maybe some state, maybe some private land, and everybody benefits from it. So that's why prescribed burning often includes private lands, and it's a lot easier to justify us spending taxpayer money to get it done. Liability. Kendall wanted us to speak about liability a little bit. So I talked about us operating as burn bosses, like prescribed fires. As government employees, prescribed fires, probably the biggest liability we face is when we're planning and putting fire on the ground. As long as we're operating under that prescribed fire plan that's been signed off by our decision makers in our agency, as burn bosses, we're not going to be held personally liable if we're following that plan, because it's an agreement that we're going to operate under these conditions, and we should be able to control it, and everybody's in agreement this is the best time to do it, the best way to do it. Where you can suffer liability as an individual working for the government is if you're operating outside of a burn plan. And Don talked about negligence, and you can be simply negligent and grossly negligent. And as a burn boss, if you're operating out of that burn plan, you're going to be probably found negligent, either simply or gross, and be personally held accountable. Now, it's not saying that we don't have prescribed fires that are operated within the burn plan and there's a negative outcome, unforeseen circumstances caused us to burn up some private land that we didn't want to. And in those cases, it's the BLM that's going to be held liable. It's the whole government. They'll take that bullet for us because we were in agreement with them of how we were going to operate. As landowners, if you you're going to be authorized by your county and your VFDs there if you're on a burn ban or not, or if you can get a burn permit to burn. But as a landowner, if you're putting a fire on the ground on your land, then you're going to be liable for it. So it works out really good when we can get into a cooperative agreement and recognize the benefits of fire on the landscape and include private land. A lot of times it's a win-win-win for all of us. I'm sure there's probably some questions about that, but I hope I did a good enough job of covering it. So unless Case has any go backs, we'll open it up for questions. I did want to show one other thing here. Can you guys see the Montana map now? No.
Not yet.
What about now?
Now we can see it. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so as of June 18th, this is the current drought monitor for Montana. Don showed you some outlooks, but this is pretty much currently where we are with the recent moisture. It's a lot less red than it was last year, and south of the river, we're doing a lot better than the high line. Haverfield office up here is still exceptional drought. They've been missed with a lot of the moisture that we've gotten down here. But we're still looking a little dry, even though we have green grass. And I think that's mostly in those heavier fuels like Don was alluding to earlier. And then the live fuel moistures, right? So even just driving through the breaks, everybody can see how drought stressed all those conifer are and how many conifer we've lost through the drought just due to natural mortality. There's quite a bit of red trees starting to show on the breaks. So I think that drought the last 2 years we're definitely seeing the toll, and it's going to take a little while to bounce back from it. But I just wanted to give a visual overview of where, Fergus and Petroleum County we're at in terms of drought. And currently it's still rating out right in that kind of severe drought to moderate drought area. So it's green out there right now. It's going to cure out, and that extra grass load will make fires start to move around on us a little bit. If we do have those drying trends that Don was predicting, or not Don, the Weather Service was predicting that Don showed us on those outlooks. So with that, we'll open up questions.
Yeah.
I have a question on your lop and scatter. Now, I don't know anything about sagebrush. I've been blessed to not have any sage grouse habitat. but would your lop and scatter, would there be any benefit whatsoever to not scattering it and leaving the trees as kind of seed beds, because it protects those areas that are growing up in inside that tree? A year later, there's generally quite a seed bed. Would it provide any additional cover for sage grouse, or would they not use it at all?
Possibly. So generally the lop and scatter. So I was talking about like the I guess constraints we hold them to, like no more than 2 foot in depth off the ground. When you get into those areas where there's a lot of trees, you're going to have a lot more than 2 feet. And knowing how long that fuel bed stays there and is going to be cured out, that's can produce some fairly significant fire effects if you've got a 3 or 4 foot fuel bed depth.
Sure.
So that's generally why we scatter it out, is just so it's not quite so deep. So that if a fire does come through, knowing how long it's going to probably be there before it rots, it'll kind of, I guess, hopefully keep that fire out of the crowns, because that's the whole point of removing that understory.
Okay.
And just one thing to add on, it's for those, especially the sagebrush flats, removing those conifers. A lot of times we're removing perches from hawks too, because hawks like sage grouse for meals to diversify their diet, just like we do. So getting those perches out, I think, is a big reason why those biologists request that we're removing those conifer in the sage grouse priority habitats and sage flats.
Does that answer your question, kind of?
Yep, it does.
Okay.
All right, we got a question from Josh.
This is Josh Hobbs. Thanks, guys, for the information. I was wondering if you would be willing to share your 5-year mastication plan and potentially your burn areas. Winnett ACES has property off of Kincan Road that we are starting to lop and scatter starting this summer. And it looked like some of your guys' plans were right next to adjacent to the stuff we're working on. So perhaps we can work together. So
Yeah.
just a comment, guys. Thank you for the information.
Yep.
Awesome. Any other questions? If we don't, I'll get these guys' contact info or whoever they would like you guys to reach out to, and I'll have that for everyone at the end of this. Thank you guys so much for joining, and feel free to hop off whenever you need to.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks.
See ya. And so now we are going to move over to Toby Dahl, who is a landowner. He's a little bit closer to Roundup, and I'll let him tell his story. So over to you.
Well, I'm Toby Dahl. I'm a 5th generation rancher on the same piece of ground. I've been cutting trees down for 25 years. I estimate that I've cut about 2 million trees down so far. I've also, since the Dahl fire, had 5 controlled burns that have encompassed about 2,500 acres. Initially, I started out with a chainsaw just trying to clear roads because, like so much of the bulls, driving around on all of our rutted out 2-tracks with trees scraping the sides of the pickup, I didn't like it. So I started a technique called windrowing, where I took all the trees and drop everything across the road, which is a very efficient way to go ahead and get 40-foot spacings around your roadway. And then, because I was adding some farming farther out in areas that hadn't really been worked, I had a 16-foot disc, and I didn't have a single road where I could get my disc down them. So through time, I just started widening things out, and I started widening fences. And then in 2012, the Dahl fire happened, and it made me rethink all of my strategies because I realized that I wasn't thinking big enough. We lost about 15 miles of fence in that fire and rebuilt 12, rolled it up. And, it ended up to be an absolute blessing. It's one of the greatest things that really ever happened to this ranch. We were traditionally running a, cow-calf operation, but we didn't have a single pasture that wasn't overloaded with pine trees. And so, as many of you know, pine needles cause abortions. And so this fire really opened my eyes that, and I back up a little bit. I had always been a proponent of fire. We averaged 3 fires a year just on the ranch, and we would always go out and put them out. I mean, here we are at 2 o'clock in the morning shoveling, down through 14 inches of duff to try to stop this fire. And then we'd sit on it for 4 or 5 days, and it was just a no-win situation. So since the Dahl fire, I got into a diamond disc mulcher and a cat track loader, and I got through Equip. I got some contracts and started, doing large acreages. I've done maybe 700 acres of mastication. I do a mix of mastication. I do a mix of piling and burning. I also have a new technique, and this is the most cost effective, but I'm just laying the trees down and I'm preparing my burns so that I have an unnatural fuel load in advance of ignition. And so it's allowing me to light fires in times of the year that normally wouldn't carry a fire. I'm very, very happy with that technique. Am I addressing any landowners, other landowners or people? Okay. The first thing that happens after a major fire system is the shock, the absolute shock of everything changes. And your trees and your roadways, you're going to have to deal with all the black wood. And I'm a proponent of trying to do everything in advance, because dealing with green trees is substantially easier than dealing with black trees. We chainsawed everything. We had a logging crew come in to take everything that was merchantable, and that helped. And then we widened our roads, because one of the things that you can't do is you can't, every time you go out, get your chainsaw out and deal with one of the hundreds of thousands of trees that's going to be over your fence lines and roads. So you kind of have to tackle it all at once. In hindsight, one of the things that I would have done instead of chainsawing anything is I would have rented a large dozer and I would have uprooted everything, because the stumps were still, they created quite an issue for, getting to some of those tough areas. But I forgot where I'm going. Can I show some pictures? I'll share my screen.
Is it working for you? Let me know if you have any issues.
I am having an issue. Is anything happening?
Not on our end. Try again now, that bottom button.
Hell, I lost you. I'm sorry, you guys.
No, you're fine. Sometimes that'll happen. Can you get back to the main Zoom page?
Okay.
Because we can still see and hear you, so that's a good sign. Perfect. Now we can see your screen.
Okay.
If you, drag it into the middle and you'll be good. Thanks.
This is a typical ridge where this is the first time that I laid, we just went through with chainsaws and we just laid it all down and let it cure. Before and after pictures of, what was an actual forest, and this is this year. So this is about 7 years later. You can see all the stumps. It burned pretty clean. The bones were cleaned up. Here's the same ridge during a burn. Same ridge after. My goal is to open up the canopy. I want grass underneath, and I want to leave the absolute best genetic trees behind. This is, just lighting the whole trees laying down seasoned and after. And as a landowner that puts fire on the ground, it's terrifying. There's a lot of, because if anything goes wrong, I know they're coming after me. That's why I like these other methods where I can get fire in the cooler parts of the year. Am I going too fast? This is a picture of the Dahl fire when it burned over. Picture of the Dahl fire today. I mean, the scars heal. It takes about 10 years, as you all well know, for most of the ponderosa trees to fall down. And the fellow from the DNRC that I believe mentioned it, or no, it was a BLM, 10-year rotations on your controlled burns. I think that's absolutely 7 to 10 years is my goal as well. Typical Bull Mountain thickets. After the Dahl fire, while the Dahl fire was going on. This is an overview from Google Earth before the fire, after the fire. You know, the best thing that I found that when people landowners are going through the shock is trying to get them to change their mindset. Now, how do I just get, I can be done with this. How do I get back?
So up at the top of your screen, there should be a pop-up that'll say stop sharing.
Got it.
Perfect. Yeah, those were great pictures. It was awesome.
And it's, you know, I preaching to the choir here, but you know, my goal is to put fire back on the landscape and get people comfortable with it. Because, you know, from a taxpayer standpoint, you know, the mastication is, I mean, extremely effective, but it's a very, very expensive way to do things. But this technique of preparing areas well in advance and then burning in the cooler parts of the year. The other thing that does is you don't harm any of your grass plants. You know, when you're trying to burn, when you have green crowns, depending on the severity of the fire, is you can set back a lot of those grass plants. The other question I have that I get a lot is about weeds, and if you have a very weedy place before a fire, well, you're going to have a very weedy place after a fire. But if you start with healthy rangeland, then it's going to come back and it's going to be much better than it was before. I don't really know what else to say, Kendall.
Oh, this is great. Did you have any structures that were burned or any issues trying to protect your herd? And what would you suggest doing?
Well, this strangely enough is we had just with the fire, we had just grazed. We had taken all the grass off of it and just moved the cattle before. And it's funny to watch, you know, little itty bitty grass where the fire just kind of rolls along the ground. It's like dust almost, but with a 50-mile-an-hour wind and a 100-degree day, it can do lots of stuff. And, you know, I've cut a lot of big fire corridors now, you know, because I've got the ranch sectioned off in sections so that I can hopefully have a controlled burn every year, every other year. I mean, you all know that the problem with trying to orchestrate something like that and looking at your windows of opportunity. Sorry, I'm a little bit off today. No, structure-wise, but in that extreme scenario, there's nothing you can do. There is no amount of protection, thinning, anything. And when a fire is spotting a mile in front of itself, you know, it's in God's hands at that point. Our structures, though, that we did see is we had embers crawling into every building. We had some loafing sheds catch fire as those embers blew in and caught the 2 foot of old manure on fire. Shops, I have a sawmill shop, and embers blew in there. But we had so much manpower around here and unable to do anything except cut a break around where we just placed people in around all of the buildings. And so as they caught on fire, they were immediately put out. I didn't know from a home, until you live through something like that, you don't realize how many embers, hot embers, are in the air, big embers. So it was fences, which were old, 90-year-old fences anyway. And so we finally had a reason to go do something. And if you are going to have a fire, I would highly recommend that you have one of the first big fires of the year, because the government seems to has money to step in and help, and it would have been different if we'd had to rebuild all that fence without financial assistance. They also came in and they reseeded areas, and it was questioned whether it was necessary or not. The seed was an incredible addition. I don't, when you get it where when you have 12 inches of duff and you haven't had a grass plant for 30 or 40 years, it's going to take a long time to fill in. And I really think that's where you focus.
And where were you getting this assistance from? Was this?
The assistance came through the DNRC. I mean, I believe that was, it was the DNRC. It was wonderful. I'm the only non-psychopathic person that you'll meet that hopes for a fire every single year.
I'm the second there, Toby.
Amen, Ross.
I got a question for you. Have you noticed a significant grass regrowth in the areas that you just did the mastication on?
It's incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. The stuff I did on Chandler Hill, where there hadn't been a blade of grass in 10 years, is just a lush green carpet now.
Yep, I've noticed the same thing in the projects that I've done, and now I'm getting to where I got before and after pictures of the project, and then I'll go back and do pictures a year later, and the grass that comes in is absolutely astonishing. And people are worried about weed problems, but if you can allow that grass to grow and it overpopulates before the weeds get in there, then you won't have a significant weed problem in that area.
Yeah, and of course, as an operator, you need to know, stay out of the hound's tongue and don't scatter that.
Yeah, right. Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's and the proof's in the pictures. And once people see it and those pine needle beds are stirred up and exposed, yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. One thing that I might add on fire and mastication is, as an operator, with a long-term goal in mind, is I'm always paying attention to the pine cone crop. That is one thing that I would caution everybody that's, trying to control conifers is, if you've got a really good pine cone year, you might rethink burning it. You might wait till those pine cones get kind of rotted down and lose their seed value, because my gosh, you could go in, burn 1,000 acres and end up with a worse problem. But that is where the follow-up burn, the every 7 to 10 years, will I think should get a handle on it. There's a lot of skeptics in my life when I started putting fire on the ground, and I've invited everybody out to see what I'm burning, my techniques for getting it prepared, and I've converted a lot of people through that. Just want everybody to know, because people see fire on the worst days of the year. Very few people see fire in the cooler parts of the year, and it's a different animal. It has real it's great potential to get us back to where we should be.
Do you have to get local permissions, or do you just go out and burn?
Well, the first couple of times it was almost, well, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. But once, with enough, you got to educate people, and you got to invite them, and you got to talk to them and make, once you have some trust. Now all the local fire departments invited me in last year, and they said, what can we do for you? So it went from absolutely not to, keep up the good work. So it's just, so yeah, it's you still have, as long as you're not under burn restrictions, Ross, as a landowner, my understanding is you can put fire on the ground. Knowing it's your butt though the whole time.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know.
To just come to the Pines right now and talk to everybody. Town meeting.
Is it subdivision? Is it Pine subdivision?
Yeah, hang on a second. I'll start our video back up. Yeah, so the project that Toby that we're working on, and what Annika was saying is she'd really like to get a hold of those pictures. And Toby, I've seen your presentation a couple other times before, and I appreciate the information, but it's kind of up on the wall up there. There's 80 homes in Valley County that are inside the CMR boundary, which is inside, encompasses the Army Corps of Engineers recreation area at the Pines. And it's a complicated thing, but there's about 80 lots in this subdivision down there. And this thing is chock full of ponderosa pine and my favorite junipers in the world.
Junipers.
And we've been working on this project for a while, and my goal is to introduce fire back into that landscape. And it's just not my goal. The fish is working on this. So that 7 to 10 years you're talking about, they had a large fire. It was about 600 acres in 96. And that thing needs reburned right now. And It's so 96, it's been, I'm really crappy at math today, but it's been 25 years. And that, you know, historical burn regime needs to come in again before that stuff, you know, gets any bigger. And, you know, the resistance, one of the landowners there, great guy, love the guy to death. You know, he just goes, you know what, I can take this, I can lose my house to a fire that God put on the landscape. That's no problem. But, you know, I just can't see why you burning this thing across the road. If that burned my house, I'd be mad. And so the context, Toby, as you said, they see fire on the worst day possible. We have systems and measures, and we do our best to minimize, use those low fire days and low fire activity days to maximize that and reduce the stand loss, let's call it. And it's just hard it's a paradigm shift from all fire is evil to how can fire be good? And it's an educational process, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
I'm happy to share all of. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Was somebody saying something? I'm happy to share all of my pictures with anybody that can use them to help show other people what's possible. So.
Thank you. That'd be great.
And as far, I mean, you guys are, you know, is with your offices, I mean, your people, you know, you're trying to do wildfire stuff, but you got people management. That's the one thing where I'm at on my own land that I don't have red tape and problem, and how you go and change that mindset is, I don't know. I mean, haters gonna hate. That's, some people will never change.
Don, I've got a lot of before and after pictures also, if you were interested in, especially around homes. We've been doing a lot of 3 to 6 acre acreages around houses, and the difference you can make there is just amazing. Of course, you can't do the fire after, but if a fire did come through and it wasn't terribly severe, at least you'd keep that fire on the ground, and it would be something that you could actually defend your home with.
yeah, we've done a couple, you know, we're taking all the roads and everything and widening out the effective road widths just to try to make some shaded field breaks, essentially using the roads, just like you were talking about using. And then we've actually gone through and made used mechanical on a couple places and put a couple shaded fuel breaks in the middle. The whole thing is just to try to keep fire compartmentalized. If we end up with fire in the pines, it's as likely to come from inside the pines as a human-caused fire as a natural fire from outside the pines. So the whole idea is if we can build enough compartments and have it and be able to catch it on a couple control lines, we got a chance anyway. So yeah, Ross, I'd appreciate sharing those. I do get to see a bunch of the pictures on the Miracle of God known as Facebook that I see you putting pictures on there, Ross, and I appreciate those. But you know, platform, if we could get those and educate those people too. It's a process. My saying is push, pull, drag, plead. You know, you're trying to get to the right outcome. So
yeah.
Thanks,
Another
guys.
thing would be the Bruce Reed. He used to be a forester, I believe, for the DNRC, and he went through every county road in the Bull Mountains and did a fire assessment of just the roads and access points. And it's absolutely terrible, but I don't think there's anybody doing anything with that information. And it would be nice to get something started there, especially from a firefighter's point of view, because there could be a subdivision on fire and I don't even think they would go in because they won't be able to get out. And I think that would be a great starting point for these housing associations and subdivisions to, you know, a good starting point.
Did Bruce do that stuff for the conservation district, Ross? Do you know?
Yeah, it was with the conservation district.
Okay.
But they're willing to share that info. I mean, it's sitting right there and it's a great report. And I think it could be a benefit to a lot of people.
Cool. Good. Thank you. Appreciate the information, Sheriff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I got a message from Reba Algren. She is a NRCS agent here in Winnett, and she wanted to mention that NRCS assisted with the reseeding of 7,000 acres in the Dahl fire. and helped numerous producers replace fences. So that is a resource to people if you are affected by fire. Yeah, do I have any other questions from anyone, especially landowners, you know, maybe Brenda or Reba or Brent, Trish, anyone?
I've got a question, I guess, for maybe Dawn and Anika. I've done a lot of work in Kansas and Oklahoma with landowners and kind of landowner-led prescribed burn associations. Is there anything like that in Montana or anybody that you've worked with that's a landowner-led type organization?
So I'll grab this one. Really the short answer is yes in the infancy stages, because really we didn't have a funded mechanism until they redid the forest action plan and were able to take some of that money identified in the farm bill to utilize for essentially for what we're talking about. And so DNRC's really been heavy on suppression just because of organization size. So when they've increased some funding, some soft funding through the Forest Action Plan Implementation Grant Program, we're starting to increase the number of positions like Anika has. And so they've got a fire adapted communities learning network that's a grassroots organization that's largely just starting up, and there's a handful of folks that are trying to get that thing going and spin it to the point that it gets a little bit more traction. So they're about a year in. We've had some turnover in that project lead in Missoula, so the new gal, her name's Julia Berkeley. And she's kind of the statewide coordinator of that. And so Julia is actually going to come over here in the next couple of months and work with Anika to see how we can grab what they're doing largely over on the west side of the state and try to begin implementing some of that fire adapted learning network. And also, we're kicking around the whole prescribed fire. How do we implement that as a program? And really not big enough to have the capacity to do it, but if we can put people together that are interested in it, kind of like what Toby was talking about, an exchange of ideas, I think, is as much as anything, and putting the right people in touch with the right people. So yes, the answer is it's there, but it's in its infancy, and I hope to get it done at a little better pace. How's that?
That landowner-led type organizations are working pretty good in other parts of the country, and it's just great when you start getting landowners buying in to that. So as you guys come up with that, or if Julia comes over to Lewistown or something, could you let ACES know? We might be interested in meeting with them as well. So just we work with enough landowners, perhaps we can help put together some more information for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Donna. I'll let them know that once Julia gets here, then we can give you a call and see if we can meet up.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, Toby, you are muted. Can't hear you.
If Reba's on here, I need to give her, she did more to help me get started than anybody else. She was an extremely valuable resource in my forestry operations.
Yeah, that's great. She is on here, but her speakers don't work. So I'll say thanks for her.
Thanks, Reba.
Great. This was an awesome conversation. Do we have any other questions or thoughts before we go? I just have a couple of things to share, and then you guys will get out of here a little bit early. Yeah, do you have a question, Brenda? No, she's just, how's her camera?
Oh, no, I was just going to say thank you to everybody. This was really interesting. I don't have any specific questions.
Great. Brenda is a rancher and a part of Winnett ACES. She's on our board. There's Reba's face. Hi, Reba. And yeah, I want to say thanks to everyone who's helped out, and thanks to you, Ross, for your contributions as well. It's appreciated. I just want to share a little bit. Bill Castle, our sheriff and DS officer, was supposed to be here, but he had an emergency. So I just want to share a little bit about what this call was a little bit kind of in preparation for. I don't know the exact date. I think it's July 9th, but there's going to be a tabletop exercise where for the town of Winnett, we're going to talk about, what are our trigger points when we, close down a road, or, like actions that we're going to take if a fire is coming from north, south, east, west towards Winnett. Anyone's invited to that to contribute or to share your thoughts and ask questions. So that'll be an option. I'll share that on all of our website and social media when we know more. Anyone's welcome to come. And yeah, I just want to say thanks again to the DNRC, to the BLM, and to Toby Dahl. This was awesome. And I hope anyone watching the recording got a lot out of it as well.
I would like to extend an invite to anybody or any agency that would like to come down and see what I'm trying to do firsthand. I would love to get further assistance. The government is very hesitant to step forward and assist me because they're worried about liability, but I would sure enjoy being able to use these as training exercises for anybody that would be interested.
I got a question for guys in DNRC, BLM, and even you, Toby. Is anybody using, or would there be an interest in using thermal imagery drones for doing these prescribed burns to monitor the fire?
It would sure give me more data because I just basically go by feel and gut.
Well, and especially if, embers started popping fires outside of where you want to be, you could catch it a lot sooner.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, if you don't have the resources or on the ground as much as you should or would in a federal policy standpoint, I think drones would definitely be buy you a lot more than having more people on the ground, for sure.
And organizationally, we're really in the infancy stages in the drone utilization from a fire perspective within DNRC. They're trying to bring some people up to speed, being licensed and whatnot, but it's been an uphill struggle internally for us with where are we going with drones. And I think what's happening is it gets lost in the conversation between drones on fire when you're trying to fly aircraft on fire. And I think that's really complicated our ability to have this drone discussion. When you talk to military pilots that are very familiar with drone operations, they figured out a way a long time ago to fly aircraft and drones at the same time, but we haven't got that one figured out yet. It's all about controlling airspace, but
absolutely,
we're at less than infancy on drones in DNRC. How's that?
And then as far as the BLM, they're not allowed to fly drones anymore because they are manufactured in China. So there's that whole issue as well.
Yeah, there's drones that guys can use or get that are not manufactured in China and still meet the government standard of American made.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Good question.
Yeah, I love all these ideas coming together and getting people kind of in the same space to be able to spread ideas and take away little nuggets. So with that, I think that's all we have. And I'll let you guys go to eat some lunch or have a great day. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate the invite very much, Kendall. Thank you for including us in this as well. Like to be part of this conversation if it goes future again too, please.
Yeah, sounds great.
Well, we'll see y'all this summer when the country catches fire.
Sounds good.
Take your time.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.